Welcome to the final video in this presentation series, the processes of rejuvenation. And in this session we're going to look at the electromagnetic level of energy that we're required to manage effectively if we want to have a high-performing, healthy body and mind. So if you have any pain, dysfunction or disease within the body, there's something not operating properly, this is going to be very important and empowering knowledge for you. I really encourage you to pay attention and keep your mind open to what will most likely be some very new concepts. These are both leading edge and ancient concepts. You will note the picture at the center of the screen there that have these so-called chakras leading up the human body. That is an ancient yogic concept that is really coming to correlate with what we are seeing in the contemporary sciences on the leading edge of physics and understandings into the nature of consciousness itself. And so when we refer to the electromagnetic body, or the subtle body, we're referring to energy that is really directly corresponding to how we're thinking and feeling in each moment and impacting the body thereby. How's it impacting the body? Well, we're about to go into that. So as a quick recap, the way that we've been addressing this is to break up the system into 4 levels of energy. The first being the physical level relating to movement, the second being the biochemical relating to that which is flowing through your system in a fluid manner. The third presentation had to do with the electrical body moving through the nervous system and its associated sensory connections, and in this one referring to the electromagnetic energy, otherwise known as the subtle energy body, we're really going to be referring to that which is extrasensory, beyond the usual senses in terms of touch, taste, smell, sight and hearing, which plug into the electrical body. The subtle energy body has really to do with subtle sensory perception, as I say, or ESP, extrasensory perception, some people term it. And tangibly, you can probably relate to this in that you may have suddenly become aware that someone is standing behind you or someone is in the room. You might not have seen them, you might not have heard them, and you get the sense that you're being watched, for example. You look around and sure enough, there's someone there. How is it that you knew that? Another term in common parlance is, oh, I saw this person the other day and they gave me really bad vibes, and so I didn't want to be around them for very long. For example, I'm sure if you haven't used those words yourself, you would have heard someone else using those words. And it's referring to this recognition of a subtle sensory perception that we all have, and yet we don't tend to recognize it so much, to our detriment. So let's take a look at this, and first of all, before we get into this, why don't we ask the question, what is the subtle energy body? Let us give us a definition here. Now I'm going to give a metaphorical, well, a similar association to our current technological understanding. In the similar way that an electric motor operates, there is an electrical flow along a wire. There is a corresponding magnetic field radiation. That's a simple physics concept that we really took attention to in the 19th century, and that gave rise to various technological developments that we utilize in our daily lives variously. And it was this, that when there is an electrical current moving along the wire, there is a corresponding magnetic field radiation. Now we've just spent the last presentation acknowledging that the body is filled up with electrical wires, as it were. Although they're not metal, they carry electricity within them. That's essentially what the nervous system is. It's also how our gross sensory perception works. For example, light coming through the optic nerve is translated into electricity in the brain, which we interpret as meaning. Sound waves moving through the air and passing into the cochlea. If you'll remember from our previous presentation, one of the cranial nerves connects to that, is translated into electrical impulses within the brain, and we get meaning, don't we? So there's this continued interaction between the environment involving subtle magnetic and electrical fields and more gross electrical movement of energy within our system that we then interpret as meaning. And so that is the case with the human body as well. We have the nervous system on the side here, and the electrical energy moving through the nervous system, likened to the motor, also has a corresponding subtle electromagnetic field radiation. Now this is generally referred to as the aura, as it were, in New Age circles, but the electricity within the system influences the magnetic field, and the magnetic field influences the electricity within the nervous system as well. So there is this subtle exchange going on, as I sort of alluded to, in terms of light coming through the optic nerve and so forth, between the environment, these subtle energies in the form of light radiation, sound waves and so forth, that then influences our system on a subtle level and really can impact us very significantly thereby. So electromagnetic from the sun, electromagnetic energy from the sun and earth actually enters our system through the brain, which we'll touch on shortly in relation to contemporary physics, but also through the so-called chakra system of the subtle body. Now, chakras is probably a word that you've heard of before. It's associated with the Indic religions in particular. It's in Sanskrit. It basically is a wheel of light. That's what chakra means. And if you look at the image on the side here, you'll see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 wheels of light that are generally associated in the Indic traditions with these chakras. Now, in that understanding of how the body operates, there is light moving through the system on a spectrum of frequencies, and that's why it's associated with the rainbow colors, which move from a lower vibration at red and up into a higher vibration at violet. That's also associated with the environment, visible light spectrum, and rainbows that we see in the environment as well. So it shows us that there is a direct environmental correspondence here, and that within the yogic tradition, they recognize that that energy, as it moves through the system, also carries a wavelength of consciousness, which formulates within the brain. They call it the 1,000-petaled lotus, and then that then controls the rest of the underlying chakras. The brain, as we understand it from contemporary science, controls the rest of the nerve plexuses, thereby the organs. And let's take a look at how that more specifically takes place. So the chakras in the Eastern traditions, and this is not just the Indic traditions, it's also there in the Chinese, traditional Chinese medicine, for example. They call this the dantian, and corresponding meridians. In the Indic traditions, they call them chakras and nadi, energy lines nadi, which then correspond to the nervous system. As we'll see here on the side, you have the coccygeal chakra corresponding to the coccygeal nerve plexus, the sacral nerve plexus, corresponding to the sacral chakra, the lumbar plexus, the lumbar, or sometimes referred to as the solar plexus. You will have heard of the solar plexus. If you've ever had the unfortunate experience of being hit in the solar plexus, it's a very unpleasant experience. So it gets you winded. And then we have here the thoracic center, or the heart chakra, the cervical or neck, and also the cranial nerve plexus and corresponding energy centers. Now, how this works is that if electromagnetic blockages in the chakras are present, they can inhibit the flow of electricity within the nerves. Now, to make this again a little more tangible, when there's a blockage within the chakras, and I'm speaking not just philosophically here, I'm speaking experientially, it's my direct understanding, is that the blockages create a contraction like that in the chakra. So with your hand there, that's a contraction. Now, if you can imagine, if there's an energetic contraction in those locations, can you see how this is going to be like you're squeezing the hose? You're going to prevent the energy from moving through that location effectively. That's going to, of course, impact your physiology in terms of blood flow. That is a direct correlation to the hose analogy, isn't it? Or in the neurological correlation, we talked about squeezing the wires and preventing the electricity from moving along it, didn't we? So if there is a blockage in the chakras on an electromagnetic level, it can interfere or inhibit in the way that electricity moves along on the electrical level. And as you can see here in the demonstration, the picture demonstrated, this is just symbolic of a blockage here, this darkened patch. But it is directly correlated with, there's an internal wiring here, isn't it? As we acknowledged in the last presentation, these connect with nerve junctions that then connect to various organs. Now you can see that, or imagine that if the nerves are being squeezed by the compression associated with that contraction, it's going to inhibit the communication from the central nervous system reaching the organs. And this can really actually be the basis of the formation of dysfunction within the system. Of course, pain is indicated. Over a long period of time, this can lead to disease because the system hasn't been operating effectively chronically. And if you look at the image on the sides here, and again, we're just symbolizing this by blockage. As you can see, every time a blockage forms in the corresponding chakra, it affects the nerve that comes out of the correlated area, out of the vertebral piece that corresponds, which connects through a nerve in that area as well. And you can see that as the blockages mount up, it's going to have a corresponding impact, isn't it? Big impact. You can see if there's an issue with the cranial area there, because it goes into so many different areas, particularly associated with the senses. So for example, and you will have heard of the concept of the third eye before. It's a bit of an esoteric concept, but the third eye is actually referring to simply the function of this energy center here, corresponding to the cranial nerves and the function of the brain in general. And when this is functioning effectively, what you have is a flow of vital energy all the way up into the brain. Of course, your brain functions more effectively. You perceive the environment more clearly. You can develop penetrating insight. You can see beyond the sensory veil and into subtle nature of reality, giving you a depth of understanding that other people perhaps would not be privy to. Now, when the nervous system cannot effectively communicate with the organ and muscular systems, they begin to shut down. All right, the light switch is turned off, the mechanism is no longer operating. Just as you switch off on the wall, microwave doesn't work. You switch off at the wall, the heater doesn't work. Electricity is not delivered, the system won't operate properly. So although environmental and dietary factors, i.e. toxins, we talked about that in relation to the biochemical level, didn't we, can and do impact upon this, blockages within the subtle body anatomy can be the cause of illness, dysfunction, and disease within the body, as I've really just articulated prior to that. Now, I've put that in block letters because it's so very important to recognize this as a contributing factor. Typically, and there's a correspondence here, isn't there, if we are reduced to just the lower sensory function, and it appears to us that the world is a material, physical realm only, then we're only going to think that physical or physically relatable factors are going to be responsible for our health, such as putting food into our mouth, such as moving our body in terms of exercise. Now, of course, we're aware from previous presentations that these do have a significant impact on our function and our health, but the idea with this presentation is to bring our awareness to the fact that also not only the physical world but the non-physical world is impacting our health. Now, how can we say that in a different way that's very, very obvious and yet most people might not even really acknowledge? How about this? We live upon the earth, we eat food, we walk around the environment, we have rocks, we have rain, we have air. These are tangibly relatable to us, aren't they? Now, it's also the case that the sun is coming out each day, isn't it? Shining its electromagnetic beams upon the earth. And we may take it for granted that that is there, but really it's actually providing sustenance to the entire planet. And if the sun were to switch off, the earth would be, I think, pretty much over within a few days. Everything would begin to ice over, all of the systems of nature would begin to shut down, and you'd find that this planet would become a very scary place. Now, I'm not trying to scare anyone there, but I'm just bringing attention to the fact that a non-physical source of energy is actually the source of life for this planetary ecosphere, us included. So fortunately, the blockages can be removed and systemic function can be restored. This is generally referred to as healing. So it's interesting to note that you'll get people, for example, in religious traditions, and they will, through prayer and meditation and perhaps intervention of a guru and so forth, have a miraculous healing. And what I'm wanting to share here is that we tend to label things as miraculous when we don't understand them. We can bring a level of understanding to this by acknowledging the science associated with it, and thereby bring it out of the intangible realms of may or may not and into the tangible realm of we have control over this. We know what the variables are, and we can intelligently apply our own mind and our own willpower to resolve our own problems within the system thereby. So you may be asking the question in your mind, as I've referred to various religious traditions and various esoteric paradigms of thought, is there any science on this? And the truth is that we don't have necessarily a direct agreement between science and these ancient traditional beliefs, but what we do have is a correlated understanding in various ways. And if you're wanting to look into the science on this, I'm not going to be the best person to explain this to you. I can give you definitely my direct experience. I can help you to experience it yourself. I'm more of a direct kinesthetic person. I like to experience things directly. I also like to understand it in terms of the rational sciences as well. And this is one source that I have drawn a lot of inspiration from and come to a much greater understanding, is Dr. Joe Dispenza. Now, this is a person that can articulate these things in an infinitely more effective way than me. He comes across as an incredibly intelligent person. That's because he is, and he's really looked into the depths of science associated with this. Now, here's a couple of his books on the side here: Evolve Your Brain, The Science of Changing Your Mind, and the second one there, You Are the Placebo, Making Your Mind Matter. I was fortunate enough to go to Dr. Dispenza's workshop when he was in Sydney, promoting his Evolve Your Brain workshop, and that book there, I read through that reasonably arduously, I must admit. It's a fairly heavy read, but in the book he explained about how so many people have overcome illness, dysfunction and their disease within their body by changing the way that they perceive reality. And as we've really illustrated in the previous slides, there is a direct and close association with the way that we're seeing things and the way that energy is moving through on the subtle or electromagnetic level of energy within the system. You can see in the subtitle here in his second book demonstrated, Making Your Mind Matter, he's kind of suggesting there that you can change your mind and thereby change the material nature of your body also. Now, that's pretty obvious to us, isn't it? For example, someone might get some sort of sexually stimulating idea in their mind. There's a corresponding effect within the body, isn't it? We're all familiar with that. We've talked about the fact that something can give us a fright, a perception, whether there be a dog barking or not. It could just be the idea of remembering that the dog chased us. That can stimulate a change within the nervous system and elevate our heart. We can be talking in front of someone, make a mistake, feel like an idiot, get embarrassed, and what happens? There's an immediate change within even the pigment of the skin, isn't it? We get embarrassed, we go red. So we know experientially that the mind is immediately being reflected within the body, but there's a little more as to the specific science as to how that takes place. There's an avenue through which you can research this a little more. And here's a quote from him, which is reasonably pertinent. You cannot see the way out of a challenge if you are looking at it every day from the same level of mind, emotions, thoughts, and feelings of the past. Another way to say that is the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. So have a think on that. Here's another scientific source that you can look at, and which is more into the physics side of things, whereas Joe Dispenza does look at physics. He also very much looks at biology and how that integrates into it. Dr. Stuart Hameroff, this is Dr. Hameroff on the side top left there, to the right. He is an anesthesiologist, and of course, being that, you would develop a strong curiosity as to the nature of mind and consciousness, wouldn't you? Because you're applying a certain chemical to the system. It's going to cause the person to go unconscious. If you don't get it right, there could be a lot of problems there. His associate, Sir Roger Penrose, bottom right there, was a recipient of the Nobel Prize in Physics in 2020. And so these two guys came up with an incredible theory, orchestrated objective reduction theory, which is associated with the microtubules and how energy, specifically electromagnetic energy, is moving through these within the brain. Now, we might be starting to get a little abstract here, so let's see if we can bring some tangibility to this. Previously, we talked about neurons, which are brain cells, and here is a general sort of symbolic image associated with the neuron, which is a brain cell. And let's zoom into this a little further and note here that what we can see within the structure of the neurons is these little miniature what are called microtubules, and the microtubules comprise the framework of cellular structures through which proteins and molecules are transported. In other words, they are the cytoskeletal framework that not only gives structure to the cells, but they provide the highway or the means of transport through which the various nutrients, molecules, proteins, and building blocks essentially move around the cellular structure. Now, what's really fascinating about this research, and we have here a different picture. Here's another way to look at this. Is again the neuron, and you can see all of these microtubules. They're lining the entire array of the structure of the neuron. Here's the nucleus at the center. Here's the axon, the aspect that sends the signal onto the next axon as your thought process occurs. And within the actual microtubules themselves, this is what they look like. 24 nanometers is very, very small. I forget what a hair width is, but it's a lot more. It might be something like 100,000 nanometers. So it's a lot smaller than a hair width, just to give you an indication of size here. And so that's valuable to note, because as we go down in size, energy becomes more subtle, doesn't it? But it also becomes more powerful, as we know from nuclear physics, for example. There's a huge amount of energy that's within the subatomic space, so we're really tapping into that energy. It's that electromagnetic wave moving into particle kind of paradigm that we're looking at here. And as you'll see on the side, we have this larger depiction of the microtubule, which is comprised of these alpha and beta tubulins, these proteins, those molecules that come together to form these microtubules. Now, in studies, they've been able to find through, I think it's called quantum tunneling, they get these remarkable pieces of equipment that can look into the depths of these structures at a very ultra microscopic level, is that it's been discovered that electromagnetic energy within the microtubules actually causes the movement of proteins, etc., within the cells. So we've just observed that proteins, molecules, and nutrients move around the cells via the microtubules, haven't we? Now we're taking it a step further to acknowledge that it's actually the electromagnetic energy, and this is an actual picture taken with the, I forget what the apparatus is, but a high frequency radiographic photography of some sort. Here it is, the microtubule. There is literally electromagnetic radiation or light moving along the microtubules, and other people have done studies on this. This is a scientific report. This is from actually 10 years ago. I've just picked one out on the subject area of molecular self-assembly, biomaterials, proteins, nanowires, and this is I'm just trying to get that thingy out of the way there, from the National Institutes of Material Science. I'm not going to put my mouse over the top there because it's highlighting it. And we have there the Indian Institute of Technology, we've got the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Harvard, MIT, Institute of Medical Science and Engineering, so reasonably prestigious institutions there. And it's probably going to sound a little bit like gobbledygook for me to read out here, but I'll read the title here: Live Visualizations of Single Isolated Tubulin Protein Self-Assembly via Tunneling Current, the effect of electromagnetic pumping during spontaneous growth of the microtubule. Now I'm sure I'm probably getting a few blank looks from behind the screen there, and I'm sorry if I'm losing some people. I'm not trying to be overly complex. I'm just bringing some attention to some contemporary sciences that are pointing to the fact that there is electromagnetic energy moving through the system, and it has to actually do with how the molecules are organizing themselves within our body. So let's again look at this title, and of course we're not going to go into the article. I can give it to you at a later point if you're interested. You can Google it, no doubt. But live visualizations, so live time, of a single isolated tubulin protein. So we looked at the tubulins, the proteins that were comprising the microtubules in the previous slide, didn't we? This one here, there it is there. All right, so it's a live visualization of that, and how that orchestrates self-assembly via the tunneling current. So in other words, they're pumping electromagnetic energy into the microtubule, and it's promoting spontaneous growth. In other words, it's organizing the proteins. Now that is a really incredible thing to contemplate, isn't it? And especially if we consider it in light of the Indic tradition, which has recognized for thousands of years that there are wavelengths of electromagnetic energy, light in other words, that move through not only the brain but the entire body structure. These we refer to as chakras, and that these frequencies organize our system from a more lowly organized state of hierarchy to a much more highly functioning state. Now, I asked you a question here that's very, very simple. What do you think is going to be more functional in terms of how your system is organized? Say you're a person that has this frequency here corresponding to the red wavelength, this frequency here corresponding to the orange, and this frequency here corresponding to the yellow. Say you have those frequencies running through your system and organizing your system. Now take, for example, someone that has all 7 moving through their system. Which one do you think is going to be operating at a higher level of functional performance? All right, it's a simple contemplation to think about, because this has a direct correlation with what I'm about to describe here. So I'm going to paint this in a slightly different way here, and there's a quote from, if you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. That's Nikola Tesla. They've done experiments through which they took a tone generator and a plate. You can find this on YouTube, and if you just type in plate resonance, and what they did is they took this tone generator and they placed particles on the plate. This is, I don't know, salt or sand. They then vibrate the metal plate by using a tone generator, And as the pitch of the tone increases, geometrical patterns will form from lower complexity to higher complexity. And if you haven't seen this before, this is, more than a picture paints 1,000 words. This is a video painting 1,000,000 words, isn't it? Because we're coming to understand tangibly that as you pass a tone, which is a vibration, which is a wavelength, just as light as a wavelength, through the material particles demonstrated by the sand or whatever that is on the plate, they're forming into complex geometrical patterns. Now, if you look at the way nature is organized, you'll also see evidence of complex geometrical patterns within nature itself. And so it's really suggesting to us that if we can align with these natural vibrations of nature, that has the capacity to reorganize our system into a functional, organic order through which health can be restored. All right? So, how can we go about that? Well, this is something that we are offering not only philosophically through the Rejuvenation portal, but experientially as well. The mechanics and method of resolving these energetic blockages in the subtle body anatomy is covered further in the Rejuvenation portal. And this is done through our guided subtle body restoration sessions, which you'll find in the portal. And you'll note there are both online and in-person options. And this is where I like to, although I can give further explanation, and I will if you request that, I can only explain so much as can be explained through the rational mind, through contemporary science, through philosophy, esoteric philosophy and so forth. We can treat that as a roadmap, but until you get out and look at the map and look at where it's going and follow the path, you're not going to get the direct realization of how this really applies. If you attend one of the classes either online or in studio, I can show you through my own direct experience. I understand this to be an actual reality. I've been working with developing this skill for almost 20 years now, and I've developed it to a degree through which I can assist others to get that direct experience. You will come out of these classes feeling different. You will experience a change in your energy, and over time, if you continue to apply the associated skills that I can teach you, you can certainly resolve much of, if not all of the problems within your system. You have to apply the other associated things that we've been through, such as doing the right exercise, having the right diet, changing your attitude, and raising your vibration is what it's termed in New Age circles, which just basically means that you learn to elevate your own energy to a degree through which your own system begins to function more highly, just as that plate resonance demonstrated. As energy is organized or rise to a higher pitch, you can get a more intricate, greater functioning system of organization within the particles of the body that compose the various systems. Well, I hope that's given you food for thought. I'm sure it's expanded your horizons in some way, certainly given you some ideas to contemplate upon. Once again, I invite you to participate in one of those classes if you'd like to directly experience what I'm talking about and have been discussing in this video. And to do that, just head over to our website, send us a message or email, request your required class, or with any further questions that you have, and I'll only be too happy to help you out with that. Once again, thanks for staying with me through this entire series. I'll look forward to touching base with you again soon in a future or subsequent email, and perhaps seeing you in person.